Great things happen when men and mountains meet. My name is Dr. Marcus Rani. I'm your champion of well-being, and I'm the author of this book, At the Human Edge, which I'm incredibly excited to be launching here. Now globally available online and in major bookstores and libraries. It's a guidebook for achieving the most out of your human physiology. And I'll be taking you, the reader, to some incredible extreme environments. Environments like this, high up in the Himalayas, as we summit Everest, as we visit Mars, we run a marathon, we survive in the Sahara, we deep dive to the Mariana Trench, and we trek to the South Pole together. All of which, the vista of the great outdoors and a journey within to appreciate and understand your physiology. So enjoy this, and I'll be seeing you soon. Take care. Bye-bye. Hi, everyone. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are in the world. I am Doc M. I'm your champion of well-being, and I'm really excited to be with you all today. I wish we could have done this in person. I'm currently sitting in my home, which is in Mumbai, in India, and we've got people signing in from around the world. But today is a special day because this book, my first book, At the Human Edge, which you just saw a lovely video when I was in the Himalayas a few months ago, is now live and available for all of you in the United Kingdom, in England, my old home where I grew up and spent so many years growing up. I wish I could have had the opportunity to be with you all, but you can appreciate the sensitive time that we're all living in because of COVID-19, the pandemic, and the global lockdown, particularly for us here in India, where we're going through a particularly difficult phase. In the absence of that, digital technology is stepping up to save the day and bring us together so that we can do something to try and celebrate this particular occasion. And what I wanted to showcase to you was something special that happened with me about 2 months ago, 3 months ago now maybe, when we had a live event in India to launch and celebrate this book. So here's a little video of what we were able to achieve. And I wish we could have done this in person as well, but perhaps this will give you a taster of what we're going to try and achieve on the digital session today. a special afternoon. I was surrounded by my family. You saw my kids there, my wife there, my parents there, my siblings, and I wish we could have done something similar for my family in the UK. The intent of this event and for similar types of programming that we'll be planning over the next few months is to give you insights into what the book At the Human Edge, and it's really a mission now to bring the best version of ourselves, look and explore the limits of human physiology and performance, and try and bring some interesting, exciting, larger than life personalities from around the world to you and let them tell their story and try and weave it into the content and the story of this book. And I could think of no better individual to kickstart this particular campaign. And I'm going to introduce you to a very dear friend, someone who I've had the pleasure of knowing for many years, Mr. Chris Brisley. He's based in the UK. He is the managing director of Motivation Digital. He's an ultra endurance athlete. He's served in the military. He was in the Royal Navy for many years, and we're going to talk about his military career, what he achieved by working on submarines. He's an endurance athlete. He's climbed mountains. He's completed full Ironman triathlons. He's run full marathons, and he's overcome great health challenges across his career, which has never let it get him down. And he's achieved such incredible professional pursuits as well. Chris Brisley, thank you for being with us. Chris, welcome.
Pleasure. Thank you very much. That was quite the intro. Didn't know that was me for a second.
How are you? Your mum sent it to me, so I hope that's okay.
That explains it.
How are you?
I'm very well, very well. Thankful in the UK, we're slowly coming out of lockdown. On not so positive over there in India.
And where are you today, for everyone watching?
We're in London, southwest London.
Okay, fantastic. So thank you very much for being with me today on this special day to launch the book, and my very, very first guest. And you just had so many interesting stories from your career that I thought it would just make for the perfect kickoff. And if I may, I would like to rewind the clock back and really start with your military career. You were in the Royal Navy for 10 years. You served on submarines as the class of vessel. Can you tell us a little bit about that time and what you were up to?
It was actually a really strange thing to talk about now in retrospect, because I often see the pictures of these gigantic big black nuclear beasts that go many hundreds of meters under the sea. And today with lockdown, and think we're all, we find it really difficult to get out, that we're not allowed to leave the house and this kind of thing. Well, back then we used to spend months underneath the sea, no communication with family, nothing. So in retrospect, it's actually made this difficult year easier for me, because I remember thinking back how complex that was for the very small crew of no more than, say, 90 of us on board to be able to deal with those very difficult decisions. But interestingly, when I first started, I was about 16 years old, and I wanted to follow my dad into the Navy. But I was massive into sport. And I just saw that the Navy would give me the opportunity to do sport. What I didn't think is I'd end up on submarines where there is no sport. So, but it was quite a challenge just getting in the Navy. It was really quite difficult to get in, actually.
Absolutely.
And do you know what? I actually didn't feel very intelligent when I was quite young, but the Navy gave me the opportunity to really push me. The leadership there was fantastic, and it made me realize that I actually have a brain. So after a period of time, I started to study, and what I should have done at 16, I did when I was about 22, 23 years old, and actually started to get A-levels and the like, and I was studying on board. But what that meant was I had to start going through various medicals to be an officer. One of those things we have to do is there's a 30-meter tower, and we have to climb in the bottom in a suit on our own and be released through thousands and thousands of liters of water and fly to the top. And I've already done it, and it's amazing, but I had to redo it after about 3 or 4 years as part of this process to become an officer. And prior to do that, you have to do a thing called a vitalograph, where you have to blow into it and basically prove that you're not producing too much carbon dioxide in your lungs, so that when in the event of escaping the nuclear submarine, the amount of air doesn't multiply. But it turned out I wasn't too good at the Vitalograph and actually failed it. So from a lifelong career guy, I was literally signed up for 22 years. I found that within 24 hours, I was no longer on the submarine. And within a matter of weeks, I was made permanently unfit military service. And they literally went, look, Chris, you are such a specialized individual in what you do. There is nothing you can do in the Navy. So goodbye. And it was it. That was it. Literally earth shattering for me at the time.
Yeah. And so you've described this, and I've heard you speak about this before, this respiratory challenge that you had, and perhaps people may understand it as asthma or a form of asthma. How did you sort of overcome that? What were some of the health hacks, the biohacks that you were able to do to not let that overcome you too much?
Well, actually, initially I didn't overcome it. The more they told me that I was ill, and the weird thing is I didn't feel ill. I felt fine, but things actually progressively got worse the more they kept telling me how bad it was. And then over a period of time, I was being triggered by hay fever, perfumes, stress, exercise, you name it. I seemed to just get worse. And the more medication they gave me, I seemed to get worse as well. And eventually I kind of thought, well, I've had enough of this. So I started reading various books and watching videos and just looking for motivation and some inspiration outside of me, because there wasn't any. And a friend of mine just said to me, do you want to go running? Do you want to go for a run? We'll just try and get your head used to breathing again, if you like. So we did. And over a period of time, I started getting into running and really started to enjoy it. But I found it very, very difficult. The cold, if the cold would affect my lungs, anything, it was, but it did feel like some of it was in my head, because over a period of time, as it became more difficult, I realized that if I became more aware, I could actually control it. So then I decided, I was starting to do 10K and a little more pushing of myself. And by then I'd bizarrely got into business in the first time in my life, into a sports shop. So that sports shop did running. So we started various events, and I ended up training for the London Marathon for the first time in 1998, I think it was. So literally only about 18 months after leaving the Navy, you can't do this, you can't do that, the lungs are bad, can't do anything. Next minute I know I'm training for a London Marathon, and I couldn't believe I was doing it actually. But it seemed to change my mindset and make me feel better. So I just did more of it.
That's a powerful word you've used, Chris, the word mindset. And I'm particularly drawn to it for a couple of reasons. The first time that I was really excited by this area of extreme physiology, and perhaps the genesis of this entire career journey that I've had, was when I was serving in the reserve forces in the UK, the Royal Air Force. And that's when I got to see these incredible fighter pilots in the most extreme physical environments, thousands of feet up, low oxygen, G forces, which are bone crushing sometimes, but still able to make those very delicate and difficult mental decisions. And I'm wondering how much, because you spent so long in the Navy, how much of that ability of working under stress, decision-making in the most extreme physical environments were taught to you, or ingrained, or skills that you picked up, and whether now looking back, you could identify a particular aha moment or something which really stood out for you in that journey.
Without a doubt, this is something that's been happening more recently, where I've realized I used to work in the control room, the nerve center of the submarine. So when we were doing anything really quite complicated, there was noise everywhere coming in from various different stations, and we had to make really fast calculated decisions based on maybe we were trying to fire a torpedo at someone or track a Russian submarine, or there was various different bizarre things that we were doing. But it did make me realize that I could take in an enormous amount of information under very stressful conditions, make calculations and present them to the executive team so that we could make decisions on how to take the next steps, if you like. So I've certainly learned, and that's been empowering for me now. As a business owner and therefore leader, it's been enormously helpful there, but also that component where you've got to keep yourself controlled as to be part of a team, that definitely helped me. That when everything was going pear-shaped, as we like to call it in the military, or going a bit wrong, it all comes back to you and your own mind. You've got to keep your own mind under control and not allow my emotions to take over the situation, which, don't get me wrong, I've definitely done that. But having the awareness to know when the tension is rising inside so that I could check myself. And I think running does that. It's like moving meditation, without a doubt. That was my first inroads to start to realize that when I went for a run, I just felt better mentally because it was giving me thinking time.
Yeah, I can resonate with that. I was active as well as to pass the medical for the Air Force, and then I sort of tried to stay physically active, but as university comes around and training to be a doctor, etc., life takes over. Didn't have the opportunity to run as much. But it was really when I moved to India that I started to get back into running more seriously, doing half marathons with my wife. And then 2 years ago, I committed and said, okay, I'm going to do my first full marathon, which I wished it was the London Marathon, because when I was growing up, I always saw that as the ultimate endurance event as a child. And I have these memories of those incredible runners on that April morning, afternoon, doing it wasn't the Virgin Run in those days. It was it a butter or something else? I had another name. I can't remember what it
Flora.
was. The Flora London Marathon. That's
I
right.
still have that T-shirt somewhere.
Yeah, but it was special doing the first full in Mumbai, which is now home for me, and completing it with my wife and my son. Actually, he ran the last 500 meters of the race. He was only 3.5 at the time, but I think it's such an incredible gift to give to them now, to see their parents do this running and hopefully stay active. And there's a whole chapter dedicated to that in the book as well. You spoke about running, and then part of that story then moves on for you to then get interested in triathlons. What made you, before we get into the journey that led to the next journey, but what made you switch? What made you go from running to doing a triathlon? What got you on the bicycle and swim in the first place?
I think once you've done the marathon, it's like, so what next? And I certainly didn't know anything about ultras at the time. I was like, that was just something that I just didn't know understood. So and I was a bit of a good swimmer. I used to be a highboard diver, so it was really all about getting on my bike. And in the running club, there were other triathletes, so I thought, I'll give that a go. And yeah, it just seemed to appeal to me. And I'd already done the London Marathon, so why not the London Triathlon? The London Marathon has 50,000 people in it. The London Triathlon, like 10,000. It was enormous. And it just appealed to me. I just thought, why not something else? And also in the back of my mind all the time was the thing about my lungs, and getting fitter overall had to be a good idea. Both mentally and physically. Getting on the bike was different, running was different, and swimming was different. So the overall benefits to me physically was going to be something that there was a no-win situation. And by then I'd moved from down in Devon, where I used to live, and actually moved to London because I didn't actually live down there. Did live here initially. So and then I started working in IT after training as a software engineer. So I lived in London by then, and I just started training in and around London. doing the triathlon, and I was getting fitter and fitter and enjoying it. Didn't quite have the best bike, I have to admit. Didn't really know a lot about it, but was thoroughly enjoying doing the training, that's for sure.
Yeah. Again, it's a journey that resonates. I've decided to do a triathlon myself, and we just started training for the half iron, not the full. And then, of course, this new lockdown in India has begun, so we're having to put that on pause. But fingers crossed, in March of 2022 in Dubai, that's when I will hopefully be attempting my first half Ironman. And for people interested in running, because we've got people signing in from around the world, if you're really interested in knowing how your body adapts to long distance, ultra endurance runs, marathons, full marathons, etc. The chapter in the book, which we're here to celebrate after all, At the Human Edge, the chapter in the book has been written in a way that I take you and put you into my shoes, the protagonist's shoes, to complete my first full marathon. And as I go through kilometer 5, 10, 15, 20, etc., we go on a journey, not only what's going on physically around in terms of what I saw, the sights and sounds, but then on a intracellular journey, looking at the journey of a red blood cell, right from the heart through the lungs, all the way into the muscles, how the muscles contract, the action of creation of energy and ATP, of lactic acid builds up, of the breakdown of fuels, how you continuously need to fuel the body, etc. So I hope you enjoy that particular chapter, and I certainly think any runner will do so.
So, I needed that about 20 years ago.
I'll get into my DeLorean and just go back in time and meet you then. So you're on your bicycle one day, and something happens. Tell us that story.
Yeah, so I worked in North London. And it was about a 7 or 8 mile journey, 10K-ish, back to where I lived. And it was a great way of staying de-stressed, not getting on the tube, which is an awful place to go on a regular basis. So I really enjoyed either the run back or the cycle there or there and back. And that's just how I squeezed it all in a very busy day, using the commute as my training. And then one day I was cycling back, and in London they have these fantastic traffic lights. They're just for bikes. And I saw one was completely green, and all the traffic was stopped. So I was just whizzing straight through. And as I did, I just saw out the corner of my eye something white coming towards me. And that was the last I remember for quite some time, as I catapulted through the air. And then nothing, literally nothing. And then I remember, if you've ever been in a plane, and as you come down in the plane, your ears start to pop. And this has come to me a few times as I've done a journey on a plane. And you get that as your ears start to pop, you get that as the noise starts coming in. Well, I had that exact same scenario when I, turns out, was in A&E, as with these spinal boards next to my eyes. And as the noise came rushing in of absolute chaos, so then did the pain. So the pain came rushing in, and it was absolutely extreme. Really hard to explain. It's like extreme pins and needles running from my toes to my fingertips, just going all over my body like a red hot poker in places. And then next thing I know, completely blacked out. And I now know I was given an injection and knocked out because I was wriggling all over the place, and really didn't understand where I was. But the last thing I do remember was kind of these orange things by my face, orange or yellow, and then just realizing that I was on a board, and either that was a spinal board or I was in the back of an ambulance. And I came round at like the next morning, and then realized that I'd been in an accident. Felt literally awful. And bizarrely, within a week, I was kind of fine, walking around, feeling like the luckiest person alive, except my bike was completely trashed. Had pins and needles in my left foot, and my 2 fingers in my left hand just felt a bit irritated. So I just carried on living, and it felt completely normal. I had an appointment to go and see the doctors. And then one day, about 6, 7 weeks later, I couldn't get up. Couldn't understand what had happened. Just woke up in the morning and I was completely incapacitated. Couldn't move, couldn't do anything, couldn't feel my feet. Didn't understand how there was nothing wrong with me, or I felt like there was nothing wrong with me 2 months before. And next minute I know, I was having an MRI scan, and I had completely ruptured the discs, L4 and L5. I'd crushed my spinal cord in S1. Right, this is basically right at the very base of my spine, and I had quite severe whiplash in my upper thoracic of my spine. And then, just to add insult to injury, I had damaged both ulnar nerves in my funny bones, basically, because I was in a triathlon for position when I was cycling. And that meant I couldn't grip. So I couldn't actually carry a laptop bag, couldn't use a keyboard. So my ability to work just stopped overnight. And in fact, I found it very difficult to work for some years. So all of a sudden, not 3 years before, I'd been medically discharged from the military, and I felt like I was all over it again, just given something 10 times more difficult to deal with. And yeah, there I was, spinal issues, nerve damage in my elbows, and surgery, next stop, surgery to come. And how can I even afford to live in London and work?
I can't even imagine how difficult that is. And, as a clinician, the worst, the heart sinking event was when, if you're on A&E on a shift and you get a phone call, and often these calls come straight into the A&E center on the telephone. There's typically a red telephone. It looks like those old bat phones that we would see with Adam West growing up. And the ambulance would actually call in advance and say that, this is of a serious intent. And the worst one I always found was when there was a young person who'd come in on a road traffic accident or a bicycle accident, because oftentimes that means it's something serious, and they're in bad shape. So I can't even imagine what it must be on the other side of that. But not wanting to dwell too much on that aspect, the challenge. How do you pick yourself up from that, Chris? We all have, and I think this period of time that we're living in right now, people have suffered personally, professionally, themselves, their loved ones, etc. And there's a lot of suffering in the world, and a lot of us are seeing that in different ways. And I think that one of the biggest lessons that we're learning is that suffering is part of the human expression. The flavors and the manifestations change, but ultimately we are given these challenges. How we respond to it, not react, is what makes some people stand apart from the others. What was it in you? Where did you go within yourself to try and deal with this personal health and professional challenge that you were facing at that point?
I think, like anyone, first of all, I had a complete wobbly, as we like to call it in the Navy, where I kind of fell apart, if you like. So in my mind, I didn't necessarily give up, but I was going through the motions of trying to understand how to deal with this situation. And bearing in mind, I had a very lucrative job as a contractor. I was working for I was a group IT contractor for a company that is now the world's largest auction search service in the dot-com boom. So for me, it was an amazing time to be alive. It was almost like today with the whole cryptocurrency thing. I was literally in there right at the very beginning, working in a company that was doing incredibly well, and now that was gone. So, and I'd worked very hard to get there, and now that was gone again. So it probably took me at least 18 months of just, it felt like sludge, just going through the motions of just dealing with the unbelievable amount of problems and challenges that I had to get over. And then it just kind of dawned on me one day that one thing I'd done was accept. And acceptance is the most powerful thing that we can possibly have. Because the first thing you need to do is get out of the mindset of what has been in the past and what is going to be in the future, which you don't know. And understand that where you are right now is where you are right now. That was the most powerful thing for me. And what decisions I take next should be the ones of the highest priority to get me to my next goal. Now, that's kind of easy when the world's crashing around your ears, because there are a few fundamental components that you want in your life, which is food, shelter, physical health. I wasn't thinking of finances so much, but I was just trying to survive from the financial side. And I was most definitely in the survival mode. And I think when you're in the survival mode, it is a little bit easier of making major decisions that you need to focus on. But I did 100% accept where I was, have an understanding of where I wanted to go, and then make very serious decisions on not wasting my time on other things other than what path I was going to go on. Now, this has helped me enormously since that day of achieving a great deal of things in my life. But that most definitely was the greatest learnings I had had in those early stages.
That word survival and the instinct that we have all within us is a very powerful one. And I'm reminded of a story from the chapter on the Sahara Desert in the book, where I was writing about an Italian runner, athlete, Mario Prosperi. He participated in the Marathon des Sables, which for people who are watching in may remember and know that it's probably the hardest physical event to do on earth. It's 7 back-to-back marathons carrying everything you need except your water. And it's run in the Sahara in temperatures, north of 45, 50 degrees Celsius. And on his first attempt, in about day 2 or 3, there was this huge sandstorm and he got lost in the desert. And he was lost for 11 days. And at one point in time, I wouldn't tell the whole story because I don't want to spoil it for people. But at one point in time, he tried to take his life. And his blood was so thick because he was so dehydrated that it physically wouldn't bleed. He tried slitting his wrists and it just wouldn't bleed out. And so he saw this as a sign from the universe that he was meant to survive, that he was meant to go on. And something switched. There was like a switch, a light bulb that went on inside of him. And that changed his whole mindset completely. And he no longer was looking at the negatives, but everything around him, the way he looked at things, his awareness suddenly grew beyond himself. And he figured out how to get out of that situation, which I'll leave for the readers to read about. And I think it's very powerful because I want to bring it back to COVID because people are suffering and sometimes it can seem like there's no hope at the end of the tunnel. But I want to remind people that there is, and it is a mindset. And if we can look within ourselves, then we can. And there are some examples of that, not only in the book, but obviously, inspirational people like you, Chris. So you did that. You found that magic within yourself to survive. And then you've gone on to build once again an incredibly successful career as an entrepreneur. And something really stood out the first time that we interacted was Take a Challenge, where you sort of wove in the beauty of physical fitness, community, and digital capabilities and inspiration. Tell us about that and how you started on that journey and what you achieved.
Well, Take a Challenge was born out of adversity, really. Initially, it was most definitely was an ego-driven project of writing my own story, if you like, and just posting it on Facebook and on Twitter, literally expressing what I was going through. And one of the things I did was I created a thing called the 6 a.m. Club, which was me just getting up every morning and starting again. Instead of having a nice day, I would say create a nice day. We are responsible for the creation of the actions that we take on a daily basis. So I reset my day every day at 6 a.m., got up and went out and basically told my story live on social media. And then I would write it long form. People would ask me questions about running. So I would then, after a time, write a blog post about that question, because kind of answering the same thing over and over and over in Twitter is pretty difficult. So I then wrote that blog, and then I started receiving lots of blogs, lots of stories, incredible stories of people who'd had cancer, their family had cancer, their wives had cancer, so many challenges. And then they would go and raise money doing quad Ironmans and all these incredible things. I realized there was people suffering all over the world, but not just suffering, using that suffering, accepting where they were, and then turning it into an absolute massive positive. Now, it may have been a way to deal with the situation, but nevertheless, what they did is actually turn that story was always about how they went above and beyond their own situation to help and inspire other people and change other people's lives, as well as change theirs and their families. So I took all those stories and I put them on a website, and there ended up being hundreds of them. Take a challenge. And that, because of that, I ended up winning an award in New York, which was a bit of a surprise when they flew me out there thinking I'd just been nominated. And there was people like Red Bull. I was competing against some of the world's largest YouTubers. It was bizarre. I just took it there as this rather fun experience. And ultimately won, which put me on TV and had pretty much 15 minutes of fame, which was great to make me then realize that there was this very large digital world, and I was already in the technology world. So I took the decision to, and this is back in kind of 2011, 2012, to not only do technology, but combine it with social media, messaging, whole thing, and ended up building our own business off the back of it. And we now do that on a daily basis. But Take a Challenge ended up being an inspiration, a community-driven inspiration for many people. And 6 a.m. Club now every day on Twitter and Instagram is consistently used by people all over the world. It doesn't make any money. It's not a business. But what it does do is have an impact, and it gives people a starting point every single morning to get up and set their intention to create the best possible day they can.
Fantastic. I think that's an inspiration for all of us. And is it still active? Can people still submit stories and consume stories there?
Funny you say that. We're literally building that website right now. We've built a brand new platform. We've got a brand new version of it, which goes live on Friday. So look out for that.
Awesome.
Because there are so many stories, we've just spent half a year rebuilding the website and moving it onto a new platform.
And how would people find that? For people watching this now post Friday, how would they find it?
Takeachallenge.me. There's a brand new domain name. It used to be takeachallenge.org. That actually should be live after this, but yeah. So by the time you read this, takeachallenge.me.
Okay, fantastic. So everyone post Friday, have a checkout of that new site. I want to talk about Elbrus now. Highest mountain in Europe, in Russia. Yeah. It's actually pretty difficult to get to. I looked at it a few years ago, and logistically, it's a little bit of a challenge. But tell us a little bit about your experience of firstly, why did you choose Elbrus, and what your experience of it was?
So I need to talk a little bit about endurance stuff before that, because it kind of leads into it. So on my 39th birthday, a friend of mine messaged me to wish me happy birthday from Afghanistan. He's a Royal Marine. And literally within a few hours, the first woman and a few members of the special forces were killed that day. And I think they were the first troops, or some of the troops at the time. And some of my friends, literally all around the same time, their brother died, Nick and Joe Merry. And they decided to do some challenges for him, and he died on a bike accident. So I'm looking on one side that we've got troops in Afghanistan and Iraq, and obviously I'm ex-military. And then at the same time, seeing Joe and Nick, who were doing something for their brother. So I sort of joined them. And this was me getting back into running properly. My first 10K was then, and I think this was 2009 or something. And then within kind of 12 weeks, I did the Chicago Marathon, 4 or 5 half marathons, the London Marathon. Then I did a 50K ultra, and it all started to escalate. And then one day they said, should we go do a mountain? And I went, are you kidding me? This is a bit crazy. Initially I thought they meant something like Mont Blanc in France or something. And it turned out to be one of the highest mountains on earth in terms of freestanding and the continent. And not only that, when I looked it up, it was potential temperatures of -40. Now I've got asthma, so I'm thinking this is really not a good idea. And as you find out, it actually wasn't. But yeah, I ended up going with these 2 friends and meeting up some completely random people, going all the way to Russia. It was an incredible experience just even getting there, handing our passports randomly over to people just to get to the base of the mountain. But yeah, and then the real adventure started.
I've spent time in Russia. I led an expedition to the Arctic Circle many years ago, and we went right up into the Siberian Arctic, and I write a few of those stories in the book as well, on the South Pole chapter, looking at cold physiology, because one of the things we were looking at there, Chris, as well, was the effect that it has on the immune system, the role of cortisol, the extreme temperature, how it suppresses your immune system, and it leads you to prone to more infections, but it affects on the heart, etc. So I can sympathize with some of those Russian stories, and experiences that you may have gone through. So you've reached Russia now, and you're about to embark on climbing this mountain. What happens next?
So for the first few days, we're in an area that just looks like the forest, beautiful green forest. It's a bit hilly, obviously, but what they're actually doing is preparing us for altitude. And we're getting higher and higher. And after about 3 or 4 days, we get into an area, I think it was called the Barrels, which I think is about 3K up. And it's then I'm starting to see our first glacier, 12 meters thick, which was an incredible thing to see the face of it. And I felt amazing, I have to say, before I got to that point. And then when we put the crampons on to get on the ice, I realized that something was not right with my left foot. Now, this obviously, I thought initially at the time, I'd hit my foot on the pool side doing a tumble turn when I was swimming, and I thought it was related to that. And in retrospect, it was probably more related to the fact that I'd been in a severe accident at one point in my life, because my left foot is the one that's not particularly healed. So anyway, every time I put my foot down, it turned out before, when we were in the forests, I was moving my foot and adjusting it so I didn't feel the pain, but the crampons just stuck to the ice. So my foot over time was starting to get more and more painful, which was obviously starting to take it out of me. And as we got higher and higher, it started to get really cold. And I think it was literally a couple of days before we got to the summit, it was about -37. So if people's ever experienced anything like that, that's pretty cold, and it just really takes it out of you. And then on summit day, we got up at 2 in the morning, and it was an incredible, I've got some pictures somewhere of an incredible sunrise. And even a rainbow was coming out, that was a reflection of the mountain was right next to us. It was literally stunning. So we were very lucky on summit day, but for some reason, by the time I got to the top of the summit, I was finding it, I was exhausted. And obviously the altitude was getting quite complex. And my lungs were certainly not happy what I was doing. And then I got to the summit. I've got some amazing pictures and video of it, which is on the Take a Challenge website. And as I was coming off, I blacked out, just literally coming off the summit. Now the summit, the west summit of Elbrus, is about 400 meters, but it's like this. It is extreme in the angle of how you get up there. So the angle coming down using ice axes was going to be very difficult. And now the next part is not told by me. This is the story I've got from the guys that helped get me down. Now, what I didn't know is almost everyone had got off the summit and were just waiting in the saddle between the 2 summits. There's actually 2 summits. And then in the middle, there's a little bit before you then head down a very, very difficult area. And these two guys, one Russian guy and one guy, Matt, who was a Brit, had to put rope underneath my arms and just guide me down on my chest, hundreds of meters while going down backwards themselves, with the fear that I may put my feet down, which would meant my feet would touch and then I would flip and pull them down as well. But they got me down to the saddle, and half of them were exhausted. So it came down to about 4 or 5 of them to get me down 5,000 meters or something crazily to where the rescue people were to recover me. And within days, I was absolutely fine. But I remembered nothing about that, about coming down. And it turned out it was an extremely dangerous situation, more than I could have possibly imagined. And a great story now, but it wasn't too great at the time.
Not for you, not for the other folks involved, I'm sure.
Well, they wrote that story, and it's on the website.
Okay, we'll definitely check that out. The book actually starts with Mount Everest because for me, that was my favorite expedition ever. I led a team up to Everest Base Camp in 2007, and it was a very special one because we were principally looking at the effects of hypoxia, low oxygen on the body. We had 3 tons of equipment. We were a team of 100 doctors and medical students, and we conducted 17 experiments looking at the respiratory effect, the cerebral effect, the effects on the heart, on fitness, on blood pressure, all kinds of really cool, funky things being measured on the body. And I've actually got a guest coming on in a few days' time. I just spoke with him before speaking with you, Chris. And I think we're going to be doing the recording in a couple of days. And he's currently at Everest Base Camp. He's from Mumbai. He's a full Ironman endurance athlete. And he's attempting to summit Mount Everest in the next 2 weeks. What makes his climb very special is he's dealing with COVID. His team has been struck down with COVID at Elbrus Base Camp. And we were talking about some of the medical advice and things, support that I was able to give over the phone. But it's so strange to be living in a world where COVID has even impacted people attempting to summit, where already the breathing is so difficult and the air is so thin, and the kumbu cough, as they call it, is so challenging. And now they're having to battle the effects of the virus there as well. Yeah,
that's incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. But stories of inspiration for all of us, which is what we're trying to capture today. So you've done full marathons, you've climbed the highest mountain in Europe, you've done ultra marathons, you've done Ironman, you've overcome health challenges, you've built successful businesses. What's the secret, Chris, of you reaching your human edge? What do you try and do every day? There's 2 or 3 really simple things, the biohacks that I like to call it, that you do every day that allows you to live life at your human edge.
The first thing is having an understanding that when you get up every day, and I said it earlier, don't have a nice day. Don't leave it to someone else to tell you to have a nice day. Personal responsibility is the most powerful thing I've ever learned, that I own what happens in my life, and the components that I can't control, they're outside of me. So, and how I deal with them is, again, up to me. So even if it's very difficult, it's up to me. But it's really important that you create the day, that whatever happened yesterday, leave it there, accept it happened, get up the next morning, as I prefer to get up very early. It's just who I am. And create the day, have an understanding of what you want to achieve that day. Don't turn it into a gigantic thing. Don't try and climb mountains if you haven't even ran a 5K or even done any walking. The most basic thing you can do on a daily basis is get up with the right intention for the day. Move. If your body is not moving, over a period of time, you're going to get lifestyle diseases. And I do believe this is one of the greatest hindrances of the 20th century. Some things are just too easy in our lives. So if we're not moving enough, we're going to get sick. So you've got to be moving. And if you do it very early, you've got it done and you've got it out of the way. Even if that's just walking, it doesn't need to be running. You don't need to be doing Ironmans, but moving is very important. And the third component is the mind. the mind is more powerful than the body. So I love a friend of mine who's an Olympic athlete, Leon Taylor, introduced me to a guy called Andy Puddicombe. And Andy at the time was building this meditation app, which many of you might know now is called Headspace. And they invited me to Headspace 2.0, and I got to tell my story in front of the Headspace audience and Mariana Huffington and many other journalists at the time. I do that. I did it this morning. I'm still doing it. Hundreds and hundreds of hours of meditation. It's just literally a few minutes. And the reason you do it is awareness. Having the awareness of when the tension is rising inside you, that you've got the ability to go, I'm getting a bit stressed. Go do something, go walk, go sit down, go meditate, go do something so that you can stay aware and on track for that next decision that you want to do in your life. If you want to be an amazing potter, a runner, a reader, a writer, you have to have these things planned out so that you're not making decisions that don't align with your focus. Don't watch Netflix and chill for 20 hours a week if you only have 20 hours available and you're not achieving your goal. If you live the life that you love right now, you're good. But if you're not, make a change.
It's a wonderful way to sort of bring the conversation towards a close, Chris, because even when I was submitting the manuscript of this to the publisher, the original 7 chapters were just looking at different extreme environments around the world, and there was a final one on mitochondria. But through that research and the stories and the interviews and the voices of people that contributed, and my own journey of running marathons and expeditions to various parts of the world, I decided to include a very small chapter at the end, which is called Mind Over Matter, which is exactly what you're describing here, which is I realized that whilst we are in this pursuit of trying to achieve the most that we can from the body and the brain sometimes, there is something that has to happen in the mind. And it's a conscious decision that people have to make. And it's what these ultra endurance athletes, it's what these fighter pilots that I've worked with and astronauts that I worked with and all these incredible people around the world. It's a conscious decision that people make. And that's when the mind allows you to take control and achieve some of the most incredible things and do some of the most incredible things in some of the most incredible places around the world. So Chris, it's been an incredible pleasure to have you here. Thank you. I wish we could have done this in person. I look forward to doing this in person with you one day soon, not too distant future. But thank you so much for being a guest on this program, Chris.
Pleasure, and good luck with the book. I think it's going to be amazing.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And to all of you signing in from around the world, it's been a real pleasure to have you here with me. This is just the beginning. We're just getting started. We're going to be bringing to you interesting content with inspirational leaders like Chris from different parts of the world, from academia, from extreme events, from the business world, etc. So please do follow along. If you've got any questions, you can reach out to me on my social handles. I'm at Doc Emrani. I'm your champion of well-being, and I look forward to seeing you all soon. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.